Welcome to Noir Classics. I'm your host, Mark. Every alley in this city hides a secret waiting to be uncovered. Kindly like and subscribe to Noir Classics. Also, tell me which part of the world you are watching from in the comments below. Let's uncover the mystery. Chapter 1. The boy who accused Time Riddle Street keeps its secrets between brick and brass. The Apprentice, a thin boy with oil on his cuffs and worry in his eyes, claimed his master had learned how to turn bad time into good money. He said, "The clocks did more than tick. They ran fast or slow on purpose, and customers paid for every stolen minute twice." The next morning, he vanished like a second hand slipping past midnight. 4 narrow windows watched the street from the workshop above a bakery that never opened on Sundays. The boy's room was tidy, except for a ledger page torn out with desperate fingers. The clocks inside chimed out of harmony, as though arguing softly. Nero Wolfe listened. I watched. That last line sounds like I had planned it for a book jacket. But it was the plain truth, and plain truth is the only kind that keeps Wolfe from snorting at me. We were in the parlor of Wolfe's brownstone on West 35th Street when the first ripple reached us, sliding in with the morning mail and the stale smell of April rain on the steps. Wolfe was in his chair, as always, as if it had been built around him. He had finished breakfast, which meant he had finished talking. Fritz had cleared the trays, which meant he had finished hovering. The plants upstairs had been tended, which meant Wolfe had finished being human for the day. Now he had become mind and bulk, arranged in a single chair, waiting for the world to come embarrass itself. I had just decided that the world could wait until after a second cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. If you think Wolfe leaps for bells, you have never met him. If you think I do, you have never met me. The bell rang again, a long impatient press, then a short one as if the finger changed its mind. That sounded like trouble with nervous hands, so I got up and went to the front hall. A woman stood on the stoop. She was middle height, slim, with a hat that looked as if it had been worn to meetings where people said the word committee. Without shame, she clutched a leather folder and the strap of her bag like a lifeline. Behind her, the street was wet. Taxis were sullen, and the city was doing its best imitation of being clean. "Mr. Goodwin," she asked. "You are speaking to him. Come in, and if you brought April with you, leave it on the mat." She managed a small smile and stepped inside. Her eyes traveled up the stairs as if she could see Wolfe's orchids through the ceiling. "I am Eleanor Riddle," she said. "My brother suggested I come." I knew the name. Riddle Street was not a figure of speech. It was a short, narrow street in Manhattan that had somehow escaped improvement. It was mostly small shops, repair places, old business that survived by being too stubborn to die. The Riddles were one of the old families who owned a patch of it. "Your brother owns part of Riddle Street?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "Mr. Wolfe does not waste time. That is what I need." I looked at her. "We waste time professionally. We charge extra for it." "What do you need?" "A boy is missing," she said, "and a man may be murdered, or may be about to be. I do not know which, and that is part of why I am here." That did it. I led her into the office. Wolfe had his eyes half closed, not from sleep, but from the habit of saving effort. He opened them enough to take her in. He did not rise, because he never rises. He did not offer his hand, because he rarely does. He did not say, "Good morning," because he considers it either obvious or false. "Mr. Wolfe," I said, "this is Miss Eleanor Riddle." "Good morning, Miss Riddle." Wolfe's voice was deep and smooth, like a cello that resented being played. "Be seated." She sat in the red leather chair opposite him. I took my place at my desk with the notebook out, because that is one of my virtues. I look like I am working even when I am trying to decide whether the visitor's hat is crooked on purpose. "You spoke of a missing boy," Wolfe said, "and a man possibly murdered. Tell me." She took a breath. She was trying to stay composed and failing, which made her honest. "The boy's name is Timothy Harkness. He is 17. He is an apprentice to a clockmaker on Riddle Street named Edwin Clark." Timothy came to me yesterday afternoon. He was frightened, and he said Mr. Clark was doing something wrong. Something criminal. He said the clocks did more than tick. He said they ran fast or slow on purpose, and customers paid for every stolen minute twice. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Wolfe likes statements that sound ridiculous when spoken out loud, because the ridiculous often has a mechanical explanation, and Wolfe's mind is a machine built to find it. Ran fast or slow on purpose, Wolfe murmured. And returned money. Continue. He said Mr. Clark had found a way to cheat customers. Miss Riddle said he would repair a clock, or sell one, and the clock would seem to run fast or slow in a way that made people think they were late. That part is not entirely clear because Timothy was agitated. He said people would come back and pay again, or pay extra, or lose money because they missed appointments. He said Mr. Clark laughed about it, that he called it taking time as payment. Wolfe's mouth tightened. He dislikes poets and metaphor in the same way he dislikes cold coffee. And you believed the boy? Wolfe asked. I believe he believed it, she said. He was not a liar. He has worked in that shop for 2 years. My family owns the building, the bakery below, the workshop above. I handle the leases. That is why he came to me. He said he could not go to the police because Mr. Clark had friends, and because no one would take him seriously. He said he had proof, and he touched his pocket as he said it. Proof, Wolfe said, and today he is missing. Yes, he did not return to the shop this morning. Mr. Clark called me, annoyed, and said the boy had run off, that apprentices are unreliable. He said he wanted to deduct from the boy's pay. I went down there. The shop was open. The clocks were chiming, but not together. It sounded like a quarrel. Mr. Clark was in the back room, and he did not want me upstairs. I insisted, because I have the right. The boy's room was neat, but there was a page torn from a ledger. His bed had been slept in. There was a damp coat on a chair. I made a note. Damp coat, ledger page. And Mr. Clark? Wolfe asked. She hesitated, then said it. He looked at me as if he hated me. Not because of the lease, because I had stepped into something. He told me the boy was a thief. He said Timothy had stolen a page from his business records and had run away with it. He told me to mind my own affairs. Then he threatened to move his shop. That is a poor threat, I said, because I could not help myself. Moving clocks is a slow business. Wolfe shot me a glance that meant I had expended one of my daily allowances of humor. Why do you come here? Wolfe asked Miss Riddle. To find the boy, to expose the clockmaker, to prevent murder. All of it, she said, and her voice broke on the last. Timothy came to me because he thought I was decent. I cannot ignore it, and there is something else. Wolfe's eyebrows rose. There is always something else. This morning, she said, before I went to the shop, I received a letter. It was delivered by hand. It had no stamp. It said, "Stop asking questions or you will lose more than time." She opened her folder and handed the letter across to Wolfe. Wolfe did not take it. He does not like touching other people's paper until it has been vetted. I reached over, took it, and read it first. The handwriting was neat and careful, which is the kind that tries to look innocent. Wolfe watched my face, then said, "Read it to me." I read it aloud, then passed it to him with the corners held, like a nurse passing a scalpel. Wolfe took it with 2 fingers and studied it. Phrasing is childish, Wolfe said. But the delivery is not. Hand-delivered, no stamp, a direct threat. Miss Riddle, have you enemies? I have tenants, she said dryly, and that was the first sign I liked her. Wolfe nodded. Describe Mr. Clark. She did. Edwin Clark was in his late 50s, thin in a way that made his bones look like they were trying to leave him, with white hair combed flat and eyes that watched your hands more than your face. He wore a grey apron with pockets full of small tools and a cloth that had once been white. His voice, she said, was polite until it was not. Then it became sharp and personal. Wolfe listened, then asked one question that sounded casual and was not. Did you see his hands? Yes, she said. They were steady. His wife was there too. In the back room doorway, Mrs. Clark rarely spoke, but she watched everything. She wore black gloves, though it was not cold, and when Timothy mentioned the accounts, she looked at him as if he had opened the wrong clock. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. That meant something, but not yet, I said. Miss Riddle, your brother sent you. Is he involved? He is not involved, she said. He is cautious. He said, if I insisted on poking at trouble, I should hire the best. Wolfe's lips pressed together. Praise is a nuisance to him. Then you are hiring me. Yes, she said. I will pay whatever you require. Wolfe's eyes closed briefly, and I knew he was calculating not the fee but the inconvenience. He had planned, I am sure, to spend the day reading, eating, and being consulted only by his orchids. Now a clockmaker and a missing apprentice had crept into his life. He opened his eyes. I will accept. Mr. Goodwin will go to Riddle Street. He will observe, inquire, and report. You will return home and do nothing. Her chin lifted. Do nothing. Nothing, Wolfe said. If you do not comply, I will withdraw. That is Wolfe. He is not a man who asks for cooperation. He demands it. And he makes you feel foolish for thinking you had a choice. Miss Riddle nodded, slowly. Very well, good, Wolfe said. Now, Mr. Goodwin, you will go at once. Take Mr. Clark's description, take the letter, and take your skepticism. You will find the boy, if he can be found. You will also ascertain whether Mr. Clark is a charlatan, a criminal, or a victim. I stood. Yes, sir. As I escorted Miss Riddle out, Fritz appeared from nowhere, which is his specialty. Coffee for you, Archie? Fritz asked. Not yet. I am going to wrestle with time. He smiled politely, which Fritz does even when he thinks you are foolish, and I headed out into the wet city. Riddle Street was only a few miles away, but it felt like a different century. The street was narrow, flanked by brick buildings with brass plaques and small windows. The shops were the kind you do not notice until you need them. Then you are grateful they exist. A locksmith, a shoemaker, a place that sold nothing but lampshades, and there, above a bakery with a sign that said closed Sundays in letters that had been repainted so often they looked swollen, was Clark's clock shop. The doorbell tinkled when I went in. The smell hit first, oil, dust, old wood, and the faint metal tang of springs. The sound hit second, ticking dozens of ticks layered over one another, a small army of time marching in different directions. There were clocks on the walls, clocks on shelves, clocks in glass cases. Some were stopped, their hands frozen in permanent regret. Some were running, their hands moving with the stubbornness of habit. Behind a counter stood a man in a grey apron, thin, white hair, eyes on my hands. Edwin Clark. Beyond him, through the doorway to the back room, I caught a glimpse of a woman in black, moving past a shelf of clock cases. She did not come forward, but I had the distinct feeling she was listening. Yes, he said, and his tone suggested the word was an imposition. My name is Archie Goodwin, I said. I work for Nero Wolfe. His eyes changed, not fear, not surprise, but calculation. Wolfe, he said. The fat man, that is him, I said. Miss Riddle sent me. His mouth tightened. She has no business involving strangers. She had no business receiving threats either, I said. His eyes flicked, quick as a second hand. Threats? You heard me, I said. A boy is missing. An apprentice, Timothy Harkness. Clark's face hardened. He ran off. He stole from me. People always say that, I said. It saves them from admitting they do not know where the body is. He stiffened. There is no body. Not yet, I said. Let us keep it that way. I want to see his room. You have no right. I have a right to ask, I said. You have a right to refuse. If you refuse, I will stand here and ask questions until your customers decide to buy their time elsewhere. He glared at me, but he was a man who lived on precision, and precision includes knowing when you cannot win. He jerked his head toward a narrow door. Upstairs, he said. But do not touch anything. I make no promises, I said, and followed him. The stairs were steep and narrow. The upstairs was a small set of rooms, one with a workbench and parts, one with a cot and a plain dresser. The boy's room tidy as Miss Riddle had said. The coat on the chair was damp. The air smelled of soap, which meant the boy had tried to be respectable in a place that smelled like oilcloth. Stood in the doorway, arms crossed. I looked around. On the dresser was a cheap alarm clock, the kind that looks like it came from a dime store and would not survive a fall. It was ticking fast, not a little fast, but enough that even my untrained eye could see the second hand was eager. I pointed. Does that clock always run like it is chasing a train? Cla's eyes narrowed. It is old. Old clocks run slow, I said. Young clocks run fast. That one is neither. He did not answer. I opened the dresser drawer. It was empty, except for socks, a comb, and a small folded piece of paper. Cla barked. Do not touch. I touched, I said. I unfolded the paper. It was a torn corner of a ledger page on it. In neat columns were dates, names, and amounts. Not many, because it was only a corner, but enough. One line caught my eye. A name, Calvin Bream. A date, yesterday. An amount, $100. Beside it, a note in the margin, in a different hand, returned. I looked up at Cla. Is Calvin Bream a customer? Cla's mouth tightened until it was almost gone. I do not discuss my customers. That sounds like you do discuss them. Just not with me, I said. Who is he? Cla's eyes were on the paper. His hands were steady, like Miss Riddle said. Too steady. A man who works with springs and gears has steady hands. Sure, but he also has hands that show the work. Cla's fingers were clean. His nails were clean. His palms looked like they belonged to a banker. That grey apron had pockets full of tools. But the hands holding it looked as if they only touched money. I tucked the torn corner into my notebook. Cla stepped forward fast. That is mine. I am keeping it, I said. He stopped, as if a wire had tightened around him. His eyes went to the ticking alarm clock on the dresser again, and then to me. You do not understand, he said, and there was a flicker of something in his voice that might have been fear. I understand plenty, I said. A boy comes to Miss Riddle and says you are stealing time. Next morning the boy is gone. A page from your ledger is torn out. A hand-delivered threat shows up. Now I find this corner. If I were you, I would start understanding too. He swallowed. His throat bobbed like a small clock weight. You should leave, he said. You should leave now. That is always interesting, I said. Why now? Because at that moment, downstairs, the bell over the shop door tinkled, and I heard a voice call out, cheerful and loud. Widwin, my man, you got my watch ready, or are you still living in the Stone Age? Cla flinched as if he had been struck. I looked at him. Who is that? He did not answer. His eyes were fixed on the doorway, and his face had gone the color of old paper. I smiled. All right, I said. Let us meet the cheerful one. We went back down. In the shop stood a big man in a wet overcoat, grinning like the city owed him a joke. He had the kind of face that could be friendly or cruel depending on what it wanted, and right now it wanted something. His eyes landed on me. He took me in, then looked at Cla. Who is this? He asked. Cla's voice was tight. A customer. The big man laughed. Not in my line. He is not. What line is he in? Edwin. I am in the line where people answer questions, I said. Archie Goodwin. The grin widened. Goodwin, Nero Wolfe's man. That was quick. Too quick for a stranger, I said. And you are? Name's Calvin Bream, he said, and his grin held steady while his eyes sharpened. Now that is a coincidence. You were upstairs, were you not? I felt the shops ticking tighten around us, as if every clock had leaned in to listen, I said. I was, and I found something with your name on it. Bream's grin slipped a fraction, then returned, brighter. Did you now? He said. Well, Edwin, looks like time's catching up. Chapter 2. The Workshop of Breathing Gears, Archie Goodwin reporting, because Wolfe never climbs stairs unless murder insists. The workshop smelled of brass polish and old patience. Gears lay open like silver ribs, springs coiled like sleeping serpents. Every clock ticked, but none agreed on the hour. The master clockmaker lay beneath a pendulum taller than pride. It had fallen clean, decisive, as if gravity itself had taken sides. His spectacles were cracked. His hand still clutched a winding key. Summoner had stopped more than time in that room. If you ever want to see a man learn humility in a single breath, watch a bully lose his grin. Calvin Bream had been grinning big and glossy, the way a certain sort of man does when he thinks he owns the room. When I said I had found something with his name on it, the grin tried to stay put, like a cheap sticker in a hard rain, and then it peeled at the edges. Found something, Bream repeated. In a clock shop. You surprise me, Goodwin. People find things in clock shops every day. Springs, screws, excuses. Widwin Clark was behind the counter, stiff as a wall clock. His eyes were on Bream, but his face had gone blank in that peculiar way people do when they are trying not to show panic. A clockmaker ought to have nerves like steel, but Clark had the nerves of a man who had been living on borrowed minutes. You know my name, I said to Bream. Bream shrugged. Everybody knows Wolfe, and everybody knows Wolfe has you. You are the fellow with the sharp mouth. Do you know anything else? I asked. For instance, do you know an apprentice named Timothy Harkness? Clark's jaw twitched. Bream's eyes went briefly to Clark, and back to me. A kid, Bream said. Sure, thin kid, always scurrying he around. He is missing, I said. Bream frowned as if I had mislaid his umbrella. Kids go missing. They come back, they get hungry. Clark's voice came out hoarse. He stole from me. That was too fast. It had the feel of a line that had been practiced in front of a mirror, Bream said. He steal from you, Edwin. That is too bad. Thieves are a nuisance. He said it easily, but he was watching me, not Clark. That told me who he thought the danger was. I reached into my notebook and held up the torn corner of ledger page, keeping my fingers on the edge. Your name, yesterday's date $100, and a note that says returned. Bream's nostrils flared. Put that away. Clark made a small sound that might have been agreement or might have been a choke. You are not my mother, I said. Why is your name in Clark's records? Bream leaned forward, hands on the counter. His coat dripped on the floor, but he did not notice. Because I do business, I pay for things. Maybe I paid for a repair. Maybe I paid for a clock. Maybe I paid for Edwin to mind his own business. Lots of possibilities. Wolfe likes possibilities only if they are numbered and labeled. I like them when they make people talk. I will decide which possibility applies, I said. And while I am deciding, I would like to know why a boy vanished the morning after he said Clark was cheating people. Bream's grin returned, thinner. You are a talker. Talkers come to bad ends sometimes. I had heard that line from men who had never read a book in their lives, but had memorized threats the way they memorized odds at the track. You tell that to Wolfe, I said. Bream's eyes hardened. You tell Wolfe to keep his fat nose out of Riddle Street. That was his mistake. Threats are like cheap perfume. They hang in the air and make everyone aware of you. Clark shifted, and the clock seemed to tick louder, as if the shop itself disapproved from upstairs. There came a sound. It was not loud. It was not the kind of crash you hear in a bar fight. It was a dull, heavy thump, followed by a quick metallic clatter, and then, for half a second, an absence. An absence can be louder than noise. In that shop full of ticking, the sudden missing tick from upstairs hit my ears like a slap. Clark's head jerked toward the stairwell door. Bream's eyes narrowed. What was that? Clark swallowed. Nothing. That lie had no polish. It was raw brass. So I stepped out from behind the counter. That was not nothing. That was something falling, something heavy. Clark moved to block me. You cannot go upstairs, I said. Watch me. Bream straightened. Slow. He was interested now, and interest is a dangerous thing on a man like that. You got somebody up there, Edwin? Bream asked softly. Clark's face tightened. Number I pushed past him. He grabbed my sleeve, not hard, but enough to tell me he wanted to. His hand was clean. I noticed it again, and it nagged at me like a clock running fast. I shook him off and opened the door to the stairs. The stairwell smelled different from the shop. The shop was oil and metal. The stairs smelled of old wood and damp plaster. The sound above was wrong. The quarrel of chiming that Miss Riddle had described was not there. A set of clocks still ticked, but the chorus had lost one voice, a deep, steady pulse that you would not notice until it stopped. I climbed. Halfway up, I saw something on the step. A small brass screw, bright, like it had been polished recently. That did not belong on a stair step. It belonged inside something. I made a note of it without stopping, because the air had gone cold. At the top, I turned into the workshop. It was a tight room, the kind of place where you could bump a shelf and start an avalanche of parts. A long bench ran along one wall, crowded with open clock, bodies, gears, springs, little cups of screws, and a magnifying glass on a stand. The far wall held a tall grandfather clock, its case dark and gleaming, its pendulum visible through a glass panel. The pendulum was not hanging, it was on the floor. So was Edwin Clark. He lay partly under the long wood and brass pendulum assembly, as if the clock had swung down and decided he was in its way. His spectacles were cracked, and one lens had slid out. His mouth was open, and there was a thin, wet line at the corner. His hands were still clutching a winding key. I stood there for a moment, because even a man who has seen corpses needs to let his mind adjust to the difference between a problem and a body. Then I moved. First rule, do not step on evidence. Second rule, do not let anyone else. I backed toward the stairs and called down. "Police!" I shouted. "Get the police, and do not come up here." I heard Bream's voice, sharp. "What is it?" I did not answer him. I did not owe him anything. I owed Wolfe facts. I went back into the workshop and looked without touching. The pendulum assembly had fallen clean, decisive, like the chapter heading said, and it was true. It had fallen as if it had been released. A grandfather clock does not release itself. The case still stood upright. The glass front was open, hanging by a hinge, and one hinge screw looked like it was missing. The latch plate that would keep the glass door closed was bent, not much, but enough. On the bench near the edge was a half-finished movement, its gears exposed like ribs. Beside it was a rag folded neatly, too neatly for a working bench. There was a faint smear on it, not oil. It was pale, like dust rubbed into cloth, plaster dust or something like it. Clark's coat was not on him. He had been wearing his apron, but the apron strings were loose, untied. That struck me. If the pendulum had crashed down on him while he was working, the apron would likely still be tied, unless he had untied it, or someone had untied it for him. His hands were gripping the winding key so hard his knuckles had gone white. That could mean surprise, or pain, or an attempt to defend himself with what he had. A winding key is not much of a weapon, but it is something a man can hold on to when he is falling. I crouched near his right hand without touching it, under his fingers. The key had a small notch filed into it, not factory, made, a custom alteration. That looked like a clue with a purpose. Footsteps on the stairs. "Heavy, not mine," I said loud. "I told you not to come up." Bream's head appeared at the top of the stairs. Behind him was a skinny man with slick hair and a cap, probably from the shop next door or the street. Bream ignored my warning, which was a habit on him. He stepped into the workshop, saw Clark, and went still. For a moment the grin and the bully vanished, and I saw a man who had not expected this particular complication. "What did you do?" he said to me. "That is a lazy question," I said. "Try again." Bream's eyes flicked to the pendulum on the floor. "He fell?" "He did not fall," I said. "Something fell on him." Bream took a step closer. I planted myself in his way. "Do not," I said. "You are not a doctor. You are not a policeman. You are not anything useful here." His face colored. "You do not give me orders." "I do when you are about to ruin Wolfe's day," I said, "and mine." The skinny man in the cap leaned in from the door. "Holy smoke," he said. That is Clara. Go downstairs and call the police, I snapped. And tell them it is a homicide scene. Use those words. They make them hurry. He blinked but went. Quick, Bream's gaze moved around the room. He saw the open clock case, the missing screw, the bent latch. He was not stupid. A man like him survives by being alert. His voice dropped. You think somebody did this, he said. I think gravity did not wake up with ambition, I said. Yes, somebody did this. And if you have any sense, you will keep your hands in your pockets and your mouth shut until the police arrive. Bream's lips curled. Police. Sure. Police ask questions. I know questions. He looked at Clara's hands, then at the winding key. His eyes narrowed. That key, he said. I said I saw it first. He exhaled. Clara was a clever old rat. Maybe cleverer than he looked. That was an admission without being one. It suggested Bream knew more about Clara's cleverness than a mere customer would. I said, Were you the one who paid $100 yesterday and got it returned? Bream's head turned slowly. You really do not quit. I am paid to persist, I said. He leaned closer, not to the body but to me, so his voice would not carry downstairs. Listen, Goodwin, you are in over your head on Riddle Street. Wolfe can sit in his nice house with his fancy flowers. But out here, time is different. People get hurt. That is the second time you have mentioned time, I said. It is starting to bore me. His jaw worked. He was angry, but he was also uneasy. He had stepped into a murder scene he had not arranged, and that makes a man careful. He glanced at the bench again. You know about clocks? He asked abruptly. I know when one stops, I said. Bream snorted. Clara built something. A trick, a gadget. He said it was just for fun. He said it could make a man think he had lost time. That is not fun, I said. That is fraud. Bream's eyes flashed. You call it what you like. People pay for all kinds of feelings. Feeling late, feeling ahead, feeling scared, they pay. I let that sit for a second and then said, Did the boy know? Bream hesitated. That was small, but it mattered. He talked too much, Bream said finally. Kids talk. They get ideas. They think they are heroes. Now he is missing, I said. Bream spread his hands. Missing is not dead. Maybe he ran. Maybe he was made to run, I said. Before he could answer, footsteps sounded on the stairs again, quicker, and a voice I knew came up with them. Not Wolfe's, because Wolfe's voice does not climb stairs. It was a woman, brisk and controlled. Mr. Goodwin, are you there? Eleanor Riddle, I muttered. A word Wolfe would disapprove of, and went to the stairwell. She was halfway up, holding the banister, as if she had decided the stairs were guilty. You were told to go home, I said. She lifted her chin. I tried, then a boy from the street came running to my office downstairs. He said there had been an accident. I came. You should not be here, I said. I am here, she replied. And then her eyes went past me into the workshop, her face drained of color. That is Mr. Clark, she said. Yes, I said. He is dead, she said. And it was a statement, not a question. Looks that way, I said. Her hand tightened on the banister. She swallowed, and her composure tried to return. Where is Timothy? She asked. I do not know, I said. But I know something else now. This is not only about a missing apprentice, it is about a murdered clockmaker. She took one breath, then another. Wolfe, she said. You must tell Mr. Wolfe at once. I am ahead of you, I said. Go downstairs and wait, and do not speak to anyone. Not to the police, not to neighbors, not to this man. I nodded toward Bream, who had drifted to the doorway behind me like a shadow that liked to be seen. Bream smiled at Miss Riddle. It was not friendly. It was possession pretending to be charm. Miss Riddle, he said, sorry about your tenant. Tragedy. Real tragedy. She stared at him. Who are you? Calvin Bream, he said, and bowed his head slightly, a gesture he had probably seen in movies. A customer. Her eyes narrowed. Then you can leave. Bream's smile widened. I can do a lot of things. Leaving might not be one of them. I stepped between them. It will be, I said. After the police talk to you. Bream's gaze slid to me. Police will not keep me. Maybe not, I said. But Wolfe might. That earned me a short laugh, but it did not warm the room. I got Miss Riddle moving down the stairs, because she was useful alive and unhelpful dead. Then I went back into the workshop and stood guard over a body, a fallen pendulum, and a room full of clocks that refused to agree on the hour. The police arrived in the form of Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins, because New York has a sense of humor, and it likes to assign men Wolfe dislikes to Wolfe's cases. Stebbins puffed up the stairs and into the workshop like a man climbing into authority. He saw the body, the pendulum, and me, and his eyebrows climbed too. Goodwin, he said. You again. Me again, I said, say. Hello to Clara. He is not saying much. Stebbins glared. What happened? A pendulum fell, I said. On purpose. He crouched, inspected, and then looked up at me. You sure? No, I said. I am never sure. Wolfe is sure. I collect reasons. He rose. Where is the shop owner? That is him, I said, or what is left of his schedule. Stebbins made a face. Who else is here? Calvin Bream, I said, and pointed. A customer with a talent for showing up at the wrong time. Bream lifted a hand. Sergeant. Stebbins knew him. That was plain. It was in the slight stiffening, the cautious neutrality. Bream, Stebbins said, and his voice went colder. What are you doing here? Busyness, Bream said. Same as always. I came for a watch. You came for a watch? Stebbins repeated, as if tasting it, and found a corpse. Stebbins looked at me. Where is Wolfe? At home, I said, where he belongs. I will call him, unless you want to carry this pendulum to his office for the reveal. Stebbins snorted. Call him. Tell him to stay out of this. I will tell him you said that, I said, and that was enough to cheer me up. I went downstairs to the shop and found the phone. While the clocks ticked their argument around me, I called West 35th Street. Fritz answered, because Fritz always answers as if he has been waiting for your particular trouble. Good morning, Archie. Good morning, Fritz. Put Mr. Wolfe on. There was a pause, the kind that means Fritz is moving with dignity, and then Wolfe's voice came on, heavy with reluctance. Mr. Goodwin, Wolfe, I said. We have a dead clockmaker, Edwin Clark, killed upstairs by a falling pendulum from a grandfather clock. Sergeant Stebbins is here, and so is Calvin Bream, who knew your name before I told him. Silence. Then Wolfe said, Is the boy still missing? Yes. Is there evidence of fraud? Ledger fragments altered winding key and a room full of clocks that do not agree with each other. Lefouille, Wolfe said softly. You have been industrious. Remain there, observe. Speak as little as you can manage, I will consider. You will consider, I repeated, meaning you will stay in your chair and think until your brain is warm. That is my function, Wolfe said. Do not presume to criticize it. I would not dare, I said. But you may want to know that Miss Riddle disobeyed you and came here anyway. There was a pause. Then, in a voice that suggested he was swallowing a whole lemon, Wolfe said, Of course she did. I hung up and looked around the shop. On the counter, near where Clark had stood, there was a small brass plaque with a motto engraved on it. People like mottos when they do not have principles. It read, Time tells. I stared at it. Time tells, sure, but only if someone knows how to listen, and somewhere in this neighborhood, a thin boy named Timothy Harkness had either listened too well or talked too much. Chapter 3. The Pendulum's verdict Inspector Kramer called it an accident, with convenient timing, a weakened chain, a careless adjustment, a tragic swing. But Wolfe does not trust coincidence. especially when it keeps rhythm. The pendulum chain was newly polished where it had snapped. Not worn thin, not rusted through filed. Deliberately, precision leaves a signature sharper than chaos. Inspector Kramer arrived on Riddle Street wearing his usual expression, which suggested that the city had offended him personally and would shortly be informed of the fact. He mounted the stairs with Sergeant Stebbins behind him and found me waiting in the workshop among the ticking witnesses. He looked at the body, at the fallen pendulum, and then at me. "Well?" he demanded. "Well," I said. "A grandfather clock has expressed a violent opinion." He ignored that. Kramer can ignore me the way a cathedral ignores pigeons. He bent over the clock case, peering at the chain that had once supported the pendulum. The glass door hung open. One hinge screw was missing. The pendulum assembly lay across Edwin Clark's chest like a verdict delivered without appeal. "Chain snapped," Kramer said. "Metal fatigue. These old things go." "Old things do go," I agreed, "but they usually go politely." He shot me a glance. "You suggesting what?" "I am suggesting that a clockmaker who lives by precision is unlikely to overlook a chain about to give way, and if he did, it is a curious oversight." Kramer crouched lower. The workshop smelled of oil and wood dust. Gears lay open on the bench like bright anatomy. The clocks ticked, each to its own conviction, none in harmony. "Accidents happen," Kramer said. "Yes," I said. "But they do not usually arrive at the same time as missing apprentices and threatening letters." That caught him. Threatening letters. I told him about the note delivered to Miss Riddle. He listened without interrupting, which meant he was filing it away. "Where is the apprentice?" he asked. "Still missing," I said. 17, thin, worried, and possibly in possession of a ledger page that made somebody uncomfortable. Kramer grunted. "You have that page." "I have a corner of it," I said. "Enough to show a name. Calvin Bream, $100, marked returned." Kramer's gaze sharpened. "Bream is downstairs." "I know," I said. "He arrived just before the pendulum decided to take sides." Kramer rose and examined the chain more closely. He did not touch it at first. He studied it as if it might confess out of boredom. "Where is the broken link?" he asked suddenly. That question hung in the air like a clock striking an unexpected hour. "We have not found it," Stebbins said. Kramer frowned. "Metal does not evaporate." He signaled to a technician who had come up behind him with a case of tools. The man set up a magnifier and leaned in close to the break. We all waited. The ticking seemed louder in the pause. After a moment, the technician said, "This is not fatigue." Kramer's head tilted slightly. "No, number C here. The metal at the break is bright, recently exposed, and there are fine parallel marks along the edge. Someone filed it carefully." Miss Riddle, who stood near the doorway, made a small, involuntary sound. Kramer straightened. "Filed," he repeated. "Yes," the technician said, weakened deliberately. "It would hold until sufficient weight or motion stressed it. Then it would snap clean." I said, "Precision leaves a signature." Kramer gave me a look that could have stripped paint. "Do not lecture." "I would not dream of it," I said. He turned back to the clock case and inspected the hinge where the glass door hung ajar. One screw was missing. I reached into my pocket and produced the brass screw I had picked up on the stairs earlier, holding it carefully. "This was on the steps," I said. "Bright, recently handled." Kramer took it with a handkerchief and compared it to the hinge. It fit the empty hole as neatly as a confession fits a guilty man. "So," he said quietly, "someone opens the case, weakens the chain, leaves the door unsecured, waits, or arranges for Clark to be standing beneath it at the proper moment," I said. Kramer nodded once, "And Clark obliges." We looked down at the dead man. His spectacles were cracked, one lens displaced. His hand still clutched the winding key. His apron strings were untied. "Why untie the apron?" I asked. Kramer glanced at the loose ties. "Maybe he was taking it off. Or someone untied it," I said. "To distract him, to make him turn." Kramer did not answer. He was considering. He looked again at the chain. "Filed," he muttered. That takes time and nerve. Time is the one thing this shop has in abundance, I said. He ignored the comment but did not dismiss it. Who knew the clock? He asked Stebbins. Clar, of course. The apprentice. Anyone Clar let upstairs. Kramer's gaze shifted to Miss Riddle. You go up here often? Only to inspect, she said, and not recently. He studied her face, then nodded. You will remain available. She inclined her head. She had regained her composure, but her eyes were fixed on the chain as if it were a moral problem. Kramer turned back to me. You said Bream was here. Yes, arrived just before the noise. Claims he came to collect a watch. And did he? That remains to be seen. Kramer moved toward the stairs. Let us ask him. We descended into the shop, where Calvin Bream stood under the gaze of a uniformed officer, examining a wall clock with exaggerated interest. Kramer faced him squarely. You heard about the filing. Bream shrugged. Heard talk. The chain was weakened deliberately, Kramer said. That makes this homicide. Bream's expression did not change much, but something in his eyes retreated a fraction. Is that so? He said. Yes, Kramer replied. And you were on the premises? So was he, Bream said, jerking his thumb at me. I did not file the chain, I said mildly. Kramer cut in. What business did you have with Clar? A repair, Bream said. A watch. Yesterday you paid him $100, Kramer said. Bream's jaw tightened. Maybe. And it was marked returned, I added. Bream's gaze flicked to me. You got that from his books. A fragment, I said. Enough to raise interest. Kramer stepped closer to Bream. Why was it returned? Bream hesitated. Just long enough. Because the job was not done right, he said. He fixed something. It did not stay fixed. He gave me my money back. Generous, I said. Bream's eyes hardened. He was not generous. He was scared. Of what? Kramer asked. Bream shrugged again, but the movement was tighter now. Of losing customers. Kramer studied him, then said evenly, Do not leave town. Bream smiled faintly. I live here. That can change, Kramer said. Bream's smile vanished. As Kramer turned away, he caught my sleeve. Tell Wolfe this is police business. I will, I said. And he will tell you it is Logic's business. Kramer released me with a look of deep irritation. The clocks continued to tick. The pendulum upstairs had delivered its verdict, but the judgment was not complete. Somewhere in the city, a boy who had accused his master of cheating time was either hiding or running. And someone had taken a file to a chain with patience and purpose, waiting for the exact second when gravity would do the rest. Chapter 4. The ledger that lied the shop's repair records rested in a cabinet labeled Order. Wolfe had them brought to the brownstone, along with 3 clocks and an irritated Kramer. He leafed through the entries as if tasting soup. Repairs were recorded twice, service fees inflated by careful cents. House calls billed to customers who had long since moved away. Time had been charging interest. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, the sanctity of West 35th Street had been violated by commerce, homicide, and the New York Police Department. Inspector Kramer arrived first, carrying annoyance like a badge. Behind him came Sergeant Stebbins with a cardboard file box hugged to his chest as if it might escape. A patrolman followed with 3 clocks under his arms, in varying degrees of indignation. The clocks had been selected by Wolfe through me, which meant I had selected them, while Wolfe dictated from his chair over the telephone. 1 wall clock, 1 mantel clock, and the alarm clock from the boys' room, Wolfe had said, and the grandfather clock's movement, if it can be detached without barbarity. Kramer had made a sound that suggested barbarity was exactly what he had in mind. Now they stood in the office while Wolfe remained seated, vast and immovable, regarding the intruders as one might regard dust brought in on shoes. Mr. Wolfe, Kramer said, dispensing with pleasantries, this is evidence. Everything is evidence, Wolfe replied. Most of it is useless. Be seated. Kramer did not sit. He handed the file box to me as if I were personally responsible for paper. Shop records, he said. Repair logs, invoices, receipts. You have 1 hour. Wolfe inclined his head a fraction. You are generous. I am impatient, Kramer snapped. That also, Wolfe said. I set the box on my desk and began removing ledgers. They were thick, cloth-bound, and labeled by year. The cabinet in Clar's workshop had indeed borne a small brass plate engraved with the word order. I had noticed it and thought it optimistic. Wolfe extended a hand. I carried the first ledger to him and placed it on the small table at his elbow. He opened it with care, as if it might bite. If you have never watched Nero Wolfe read a ledger, you have missed a performance. He does not scan. He tastes. His lips move slightly, not in speech but in evaluation. He pauses at entries the way a chef pauses over seasoning. Kramer paced once across the rug, then stopped himself. What are you looking for? Truth, Wolfe said. It is often disguised as arithmetic. I went back to the box and sorted invoices by date. Miss Riddle had been summoned as well and now sat near the red leather chair, composed but alert. The 3 clocks rested on a side table, ticking independently and offensively. Wolfe turned a page. Archie, he said, observe this entry, March 3rd. Mrs. Pauline Avery, mantle clock regulation, $12. 2 lines below, the same date, the same name. Emergency adjustment, $8. I checked. Same handwriting. Yes, same ink, Kramer said. Clerical error. Perhaps, Wolfe said mildly. Let us see if Mrs. Avery required emergency adjustment twice in one afternoon. He turned pages, April 10th. House call, Mr. Leonard Sykes. $45. Archie, find Mr. Sykes' address. I found it in the margin. Wolfe's brows lifted. Miss Riddle, he said, is that address currently occupied? She leaned forward. Number that building was demolished last year. A new structure went up in December. Kramer stopped pacing. Clar built a house call to a building that did not exist. So it appears, Wolfe said. Could be an old record, Kramer said. It is dated last month, Wolfe replied. Kramer grunted. Wolfe turned more pages, his large finger marking spots with surgical precision. Repairs recorded twice, he murmured. Fees adjusted by small increments. See here, Archie. $12.70 altered to $14.70. The 7 overwritten, carefully. I leaned closer. He was right. The correction was delicate. The kind done by a man who believes he will not be questioned, Kramer said. That is fraud. Petty fraud. There is nothing petty about repetition, Wolfe said. Fraud compounded becomes enterprise. Miss Riddle's face had gone pale again. He was my tenant, she said quietly. Yes, Wolfe said, and he was creative. He closed the first ledger and opened another. Time had been charging interest, he said softly. Kramer scowled. Speak English. Clar inflated fees by small amounts, Wolfe said. $1 here, $2 there. Most customers would not notice, particularly if persuaded their clocks were unreliable. Kramer looked toward the clocks on the side table. You think he tampered with them? I think he engineered perception, Wolfe said. A clock that runs 5 minutes fast may cause a man to believe he is perpetually late. Anxiety is profitable, I said. The apprentice told Miss Riddle the clocks, swallowed minutes and returned money. Wolfe nodded. A vivid metaphor, possibly literal. Kramer crossed his arms. You are building a case for motive. Who profits from Clar's fraud? An excellent question, Wolfe said. Let us examine Mr. Calvin Bream. Kramer's jaw tightened. We questioned him. He admits to paying Clar $100 and receiving it back. Why? Wolfe asked. He says the repair failed. Do you believe him? Wolfe inquired. Kramer did not answer directly. He has prior complaints gambling. Collections, he pressures people. Ah, Wolfe said. A collector of debts. Perhaps also a collector of minutes. Kramer's eyes narrowed. Explain. Wolfe steepled his fingers. If Clar devised a method of manipulating clocks to create inconvenience, and if Mr. Bream applied pressure to those inconvenienced, we have partnership. Speculation, Kramer said. Of course, Wolfe agreed. All reasoning begins as speculation. It becomes fact when supported. He gestured toward the alarm clock from Timothy's room. Archie, bring me the boy's clock. I did. Wolfe listened to it for several seconds. It runs fast, he said. By how much? Kramer asked. Approximately 4 minutes per hour. Wolfe replied calmly. Kramer stared. That is impossible. Not at all, Wolfe said. Merely adjusted. He handed it back to me. Check it against your wristwatch. I did. After 10 minutes, the discrepancy was plain. Kramer swore softly. Wolfe returned to the ledger. Entries for Mr. Bream appear frequently, he said. Small amounts, then a large one, then returned. Why record a return unless to establish legitimacy? To show refund, I said. To create the appearance of honesty, Wolfe corrected. One conspicuous refund to mask many subtle thefts, Kramer said. You are saying Clark was cheating customers, and Bream was involved. I am saying, Wolfe replied, that Clark's books lie, and men who lie about money often lie about other things. Miss Riddle clasped her hands, and Timothy found out. Yes, Wolfe said. The boy observed discrepancies. Perhaps he saw duplicate entries. Perhaps he noticed adjustments in the clocks themselves. Kramer said, and Clark killed him. Wolfe's eyes flicked up sharply. No body. Then Bream killed Clark, Kramer snapped. Wolfe closed the ledger gently. Inspector, the chain was filed with care. The books were falsified with care. These acts require patience and precision. We must determine who possessed both. The room was quiet, except for the ticking of 3 incriminating clocks. Time had been manipulated, recorded, and sold. And somewhere between ink and brass, someone had decided that Edwin Clark's time was up. Chapter 5. The Missing Apprentice. The boy's name lingered on everyone's lips, but never in full voice. He had talent, steady hands, sharper eyes. He had begun asking questions about the accounts. Then he had begun staying late. A neighbor claimed she saw him arguing with the master 3 nights before the death. He said the clocks were lying, she whispered. On Riddle Street, that counts as prophecy. After that, the boy was gone. When Wolfe decides a person is central, he does not chase him. He sends me. Find the boy. He said the morning after the ledgers had been dissected. Not his ghost, not his reputation, the boy. That requires legs, I said. You have 2, Wolfe replied, closing his eyes in dismissal. So I returned to Riddle Street, where the bakery still did not open on Sundays, and the locksmith still squinted at everyone, as if measuring them for keys. The shop was sealed, a polite strip of official tape across the door. The clocks inside were silent now, confiscated or stopped. It gave the building a sulking look. Mrs. Clark had not reopened the rooms above, and the drawn shade in the back window made the place look less bereaved than watchful. I began with the neighbors. On a street like Riddle, walls are thin and curiosity is thick. The shoemaker next door was no help. He had seen the boy often, liked him well enough, but heard nothing beyond ordinary shop noise. He worked hard, the shoemaker said, did not waste words. Did he waste time? I asked. The shoemaker blinked at me as if I had insulted his trade. Next was the woman who lived above the lamp shop across the narrow street. Her name was Mrs. Colby, and she had the kind of face that had been storing opinions since 1923. She opened her door only a cautious width until I said, Nero Wolfe, which has become, in certain neighborhoods, a key of its own. I told the police, she said at once. They wrote it down and nodded. What did you tell them? I asked. That the boy argued with Mr. Clark 3 nights before he died. Argued how? Not shouting. Intense. The boy's voice was tight. Mr. Clark's was sharp. Do you recall words? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. The boy said, They are lying. Clear as that. And Mr. Clark said, You are young. You do not understand commerce. Commerce, an interesting choice. Anything else? I prompted. The boy said, He would not be part of it. Mr. Clark told him he was ungrateful. And then they went quiet. Later I saw the boy leave. He looked angry and afraid. When was that? 3 nights before the accident. Did he return? Yes, next day he was back at work. I saw him carrying a crate upstairs. That was something. Timothy had confronted Clara about the accounts. He had objected. He had stayed. I thanked Mrs. Colby and continued down the street. At the bakery, which was closed as advertised, I found the baker inside anyway, counting flour sacks with the solemnity of a banker. He wiped his hands on his apron and regarded me. "Police?" he asked. "Worse," I said. "Privet." He grunted. "What now?" "Did you see Timothy Harkness late at night recently?" The baker frowned. "He stayed up there often, light under the door, after the argument." The baker glanced toward the ceiling, heard voices. "Yes, after that, I heard movement late. Not arguing. Moving things." "Moving what?" "Boxes. Something heavy dragged." "When?" "2 nights before the accident." "Could you tell if it was more than one person?" He shrugged. "Sound carries strange in that stairwell. Could have been 1, could have been 2. That detail lodged in my mind. Something heavy moved upstairs 2 nights before Clara died." "Did you ever see Calvin Bream here after hours?" I asked casually. The baker's eyes sharpened. "Bream comes when he likes." "After hours, sometimes. How does he get in?" The baker looked at me for a long second, then said, "Keys are not sacred." Meaning keys can be copied. I thanked him and walked back toward the shop. A boy from the locksmith's place was leaning against a lamppost, watching me with open interest. "You knew Timothy?" I asked. He nodded. "He showed me how to fix a broken minute hand once." "Did he ever talk about leaving?" The boy hesitated. "He said he might. Said he would not be part of cheating." "Cheating how?" He would not say, just said, "It is not right to make time lie." There it was again. The clocks were lying. I left Riddle Street and returned to the brownstone, where Wolfe was engaged in his morning conference with the orchids. That meant I waited until 11, when he descended like an emperor who has inspected his provinces. "Well," he said, settling into his chair. "The boy argued with Clara about the accounts," I reported. "Said the clocks were lying. Refused to be part of it, stayed late afterward. Something heavy was moved upstairs, 2 nights before the death. Bream had access after hours. Keys not sacred." Wolfe's eyes closed briefly. "And the boy?" Seen angry and afraid, then vanished. "Did he take belongings?" "Room was tidy. Coat left behind. That suggests he did not plan to go far, unless he was prevented," Wolfe said. "Exactly." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Archie, consider this. A boy with talent notices discrepancies. He confronts his employer. He remains, perhaps to gather proof. He stays late. He might have taken more than a ledger page," I said. "Yes. He may have removed an object." "The missing link," I said. Wolfe's eyes opened. "Precisely. The broken piece of chain had not been found at the scene. If Timothy discovered the chain had been filed before it snapped," I said slowly, "he might have removed the evidence. Or he may have discovered it after the filing but before the fall," Wolfe said, "and intended to expose the culprit." "Which would make him inconvenient," I said. Wolfe nodded once. "To whom? To Clara, if Clara filed it himself. Or to Mr. Bream," Wolfe said, "if Mr. Bream did." We sat in silence for a moment. "The neighbor said Timothy told Clara the clocks were lying." I said, "What if that was not just about the books?" Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "Go on. The clocks we brought here. The boy's alarm clock runs fast. If Clara adjusted customers' clocks to run inaccurately, he could create anxiety. People come back for regulation, pay again." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "But what if some clocks were adjusted in the opposite direction slow, so a man misses an appointment, a payment deadline, a train?" Wolfe's lips thinned. "And who profits from missed deadlines?" "Collectors," I said. Wolfe inclined his head. Mr. Calvin Bream. We were quiet again. If Timothy discovered not only falsified books, but deliberate clock manipulation tied to Bream's business, I said, he would be more than inconvenient. He would be dangerous. Yes, Wolfe said, and if he removed the filed link as proof, he would possess the one piece that demonstrates premeditation. And now he is missing, I said. Wolfe's voice softened slightly. Archie, find him. I am trying, I said. Wolfe's eyes fixed on me. Try better. On Riddle Street, prophecy is a whisper about clocks lying. But in Wolfe's office, prophecy is arithmetic, and the numbers were adding up to a missing apprentice who knew too much about time. Chapter 6. The clocks that hid coins. Wolfe requested the dismantling of 3 expensive grandfather clocks awaiting delivery. Their owners protested. Their lawyers followed. But wood panels come off as easily as excuses. Inside the hollow bases lay envelopes of cash, each marked with customer names and dates. Unrecorded income, hidden behind ticking honesty. Precision can disguise greed. Wolfe said it like a recipe. The idea came to Wolfe between breakfast and orchids, which is to say it came when his mind was best lubricated. Archie, he said, Cla's ledgers are dishonest, but not ambitious. The amounts are too small to justify murder. Petty theft does not usually end in a falling pendulum, I agreed. Therefore, Wolfe continued, there must be another revenue stream, something not recorded. Cash, I said. Yes, cash that would not appear in the ledgers, cash that might be concealed. Under floorboards, I suggested. Wolfe made a face. Crude. A clockmaker would not trust carpentry when he has cabinetry. That was how 3 innocent grandfather clocks, currently resting in a warehouse, awaiting delivery to respectable homes, found themselves transported under police supervision to West 35th Street. Their owners protested. Respectable people object when you imply their furniture may contain crime. 2 of them sent lawyers. The lawyers arrived polished and outraged. Inspector Kramer arrived as well, more irritated than polished. This is irregular, one lawyer announced in Wolfe's office, standing stiffly beside a mahogany case that had cost more than my car. So is homicide, Wolfe replied calmly. Kramer folded his arms. You get 1 hour. If you damage them, you pay. I will not damage them, Wolfe said. Mr. Goodwin will remove the back panels with care. I bowed slightly. With the delicacy of a surgeon, Wolfe ignored that. Proceed. The first clock stood nearly 7 feet tall, walnut, dignified, and expensive enough to feel superior. I set it gently on its side with the help of a uniform and removed the small screws securing the rear panel. Wood panels come off as easily as excuses. The panel lifted. Inside the hollow base, behind the pendulum weights, and beneath the movement housing, lay a plain brown envelope. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Kramer said, "Open it." I did. Inside was cash, hundreds and fifties, neatly stacked. On the front of the envelope, in precise handwriting, was a name and a date, Mrs. Pauline Avery. March 3rd. Wolfe's eyes flicked to the ledger on his desk. The duplicate entry, he murmured. The lawyer cleared his throat sharply. This proves nothing. That could have been placed there by anyone. Indeed, Wolfe said. Let us see whether anyone has been busy. We opened the second clock. Another envelope, different name, different date, substantial sum. The third yielded the same result. Each envelope bore a customer's name and a date corresponding to a repair entry in the books. None of those amounts appeared in the ledgers as received payments. Kramer's face had gone a shade darker. Unrecorded income, I said. Hidden in plain sight. Hidden behind ticking honesty, Wolfe said softly. One of the lawyers sputtered. This is outrageous. My client purchased that clock in good faith. I do not doubt it, Wolfe replied. Your client is likely innocent. The concealment was temporary, a holding place. For what? Kramer demanded. For distribution, Wolfe said, or insurance. He gestured toward the envelopes. Note the precision. Names, dates, no amounts written. The sums correspond to transactions, but not to ledger entries. Kramer said. He was skimming. Yes, Wolfe said. But not merely skimming. He was holding cash off the books. That suggests partnership or coercion. Bream, I said. Wolfe inclined his head. A collector requires liquidity. Cash without record is pliable. Kramer paced once, then stopped himself. If Bream was pressuring customers and Clark was manipulating their clocks to create distress, they could extract payments, which would not appear in official accounts, Wolfe said, hence the envelopes. One of the lawyers spoke again, weaker now. You are constructing a theory. Of course, Wolfe said. The facts insist. Kramer looked at the open clock bases. Why hide it here? Why not take it home? Because Clark's shop was searched occasionally, I said. Or could be. His residence perhaps less secure. And the clocks were due for delivery, a moving hiding place. Wolfe nodded. A clock awaiting delivery sits in trust. No one expects it to contain cash. Kramer muttered something unprintable. Miss Riddle, who had been silent through the procedure, spoke quietly. Timothy would have known. Yes, Wolfe said. He helped prepare the clocks for delivery, she said. He would have removed panels, checked weights, and found envelopes, I said. Wolfe's eyes were half closed. The boy had steady hands and sharp eyes. He would notice added weight, a discrepancy. Kramer stopped pacing. If he found the envelopes and confronted Clark, that explains the argument. Yes, Wolfe said, but it does not explain the filing of the pendulum chain. Unless he threatened to expose everything, I said, including whoever shared in the profits. Kramer looked at the envelopes again. How much is this? I counted quickly. Across 3 clocks, close to 12,000. Kramer exhaled slowly. Not petty. Precision can disguise greed, Wolfe said, as a good sauce disguises excess salt. Kramer stared at him. Do not compare murder to cooking. I compare method to method, Wolfe replied. We reassembled the clocks under Kramer's supervision. The lawyers departed, less indignant than before. When the room was clear except for the usual occupants, Wolfe turned to me. Archie, he said. The boy is now doubly inconvenient. Because he knew about the envelopes, I said. Yes, and because he may know who collected them. Bream, I said again. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. Possibly. But consider this. Clark retained physical possession of the cash. Why? To maintain leverage, I suggested. Or because he did not trust his partner, Wolfe said. Greed breeds distrust. Meaning one of them may have decided to eliminate the other, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied. But the timing remains delicate. The chain was filed before the pendulum fell. The envelopes were still in the clocks. The boy vanished before the death. And someone removed the broken link, I added. Wolfe nodded, which suggests a third act in this drama. I leaned back in my chair. A missing apprentice, a murdered clockmaker, hidden cash, and a collector who smiles too easily. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. Time has been manipulated, money concealed, evidence removed. And we are still missing one piece, I said. The boy. Wolfe said outside. The city kept its own hours. Inside the brownstone, 3 clocks ticked on Wolfe's side table, steady and newly honest. But somewhere, another clock was still hiding more than coins. Chapter 7. The rival across the street. Every mystery needs a shadow, and Riddle Street had one. Across from the workshop stood another horologist, less successful, more resentful. He claimed the master undercut prices unfairly. His alibi held, but his books did not. He had been losing customers steadily for months. He knew about the inflated service fees. He had threatened to expose them. But he had not known about the hidden cash. Wolfe does not believe in coincidence, but he does believe in rivalry. Rivalry is orderly. It has motive, history, and frequently poor judgment. Archie, he said after lunch, we have examined Clark's dishonesty, now examine his competition. You mean the man across the street, I said. Yes, the shadow, Wolfe replied. Shadows lengthen when light shifts. That was Wolfe in a poetic mood, which means something had begun to align in his mind. The rival's name was Jonas Vale. His shop, Vale Precision Timepieces, occupied a narrower frontage directly opposite Clar's former kingdom. The window display was meticulous, but uninspired. A man who admired exactitude but did not inspire it. I crossed Riddle Street again, where gossip had now ripened into speculation. Vale's bell gave a timid jingle when I entered. The shop was tidy to the point of nervousness. Every clock faced forward as if awaiting inspection. Jonas Vale emerged from a back room. He was in his early 40s, thin, with a pointed beard and eyes that darted like minute hands near the hour. "Yes?" he asked, already defensive. "Archie Goodwin," I said. "Nero Wolfe's office." His lips tightened. "You have been busy." "So have you," I said pleasantly. He hesitated, then gestured toward a small counter. "What do you want?" "To discuss your neighbor. And before he died, you were losing customers." He bristled. "Competition is not a crime." "Not yet," I agreed. "But resentment can be expensive." He folded his arms. "Clar undercut prices. He offered services below cost. That is unethical." "Yet profitable," I said. "For him," Vale snapped. "Not for the rest of us." I glanced around. The shop was neat, but there were fewer clocks than one might expect, empty spaces on the shelves where inventory had once stood. "Busyness declining?" I asked. He stiffened. "Seasonal. For 6 months," I said. His jaw tightened. "Mr. Vale," I said, lowering my voice slightly, "did you know Clar was inflating service fees and double billing customers?" His eyes flickered, too quick. "I suspected irregularities," he said carefully. "Suspected," I repeated. "He poached clients," Vale said. "They returned complaining their clocks ran oddly after visiting him. Fast, slow, inconsistent. Running oddly can be profitable," I said. "Yes," Vale said bitterly, "if one lacks scruples." "Did you threaten to expose him?" He hesitated, then said, "I warned him, that is all." "When?" "2 weeks before his death." "What exactly did you say?" "That if he continued unfair practices, I would report him to the Better Business Bureau." I smiled faintly. "Terrifying." He flushed. "It matters." Did he seem concerned? He laughed, Vale said. He said I did not understand commerce. The same phrase Mrs. Colby had overheard. "Did you ever confront him about manipulating clocks deliberately?" I asked. Vale's gaze sharpened. "You think he did that?" "I am asking if you thought so." He hesitated again. I could not prove it. But too many customers complained of identical discrepancies. Identical, 5 minutes fast or 10 minutes slow patterns. That was interesting. Patterns mean intention. "Did you ever see Calvin Bream in Clar's shop?" I asked. Vale snorted softly. "Bream visits everywhere. Frequently." "Too frequently," Vale said. "He collects. From you. Occasionally." "For what?" "Short-term loans," Vale said stiffly. "Busyness fluctuations." I nodded. "And did Clar borrow?" "I do not know," Vale said. "He never admitted it." "But you suspected?" "Yes." I watched him for a moment. He was resentful. Certainly his business had been suffering, while Clar's had appeared robust. Motive for sabotage, perhaps for murder, possibly. "Where were you yesterday morning at 9? I asked. "In my shop with customers." Sergeant Stebbins confirmed. That was true. The police had checked. Vale's alibi held. "Did you ever go upstairs in Clar's workshop?" I asked. "Never." "Did you know about the envelopes hidden in the bases of his grandfather clocks?" He stared at me. "Envelopes. Cash," I said. He blinked, genuinely startled. "Number." It was not a practiced reaction. His pupils widened, his mouth parted slightly. Surprise, not calculation. "You did not know," I said. "No," he replied quietly. That shifted something. You threatened to expose inflated fees, I said, but you did not know about hidden cash. I did not, Vale said firmly. Did you know about the filed pendulum chain? He frowned. Filed. The chain that killed him was weakened deliberately. Vale stared at me, then shook his head slowly. Number. I believed him. He had motive to complain, to report, even to gloat. But murder requires proximity and nerve, and Vale, for all his resentment, lacked something harder. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened to my report without interruption. So, he said at last, Mr. Vale knew of inflated service fees, but not of concealed cash. Correct, I said. He threatened exposure, but through respectable channels. And his alibi? Solid. Wolfe nodded. Then he is our shadow, not our culprit. Unless he hired someone, I suggested. Wolfe shook his head. He lacks imagination for such violence. His resentment is vocal, not surgical. Surgical like filing a chain, I said. Precisely. Wolfe leaned back slightly. We now have 3 actors, Cla. The ingenious fraud, Bream, the collector with incentive, Vale, the resentful competitor, and 1 missing apprentice. And a removed chain link, I added. Yes, Wolfe said softly. The removed link is the key. To what? I asked. To sequence, Wolfe replied. He closed his eyes, assembling events as if they were gears on a bench. Vale did not know of the hidden cash, Wolfe continued. Therefore his grievance was partial. Bream likely knew. Cla retained possession of the money. The boy discovered irregularities. The chain was filed before it snapped. You think the filing occurred before Timothy disappeared? I said. I do, Wolfe said, meaning Timothy might have witnessed it. Or discovered it, Wolfe corrected, and removed the broken piece to protect himself, I said. Yes. I leaned forward, which makes the boy not only a witness to fraud, but to attempted murder. Wolfe opened his eyes. Exactly. Outside, the afternoon light slanted across West 35th Street, lengthening shadows, on Riddle Street. 1 shadow had been ruled out, but the darkest one was still standing, smiling, and pretending to collect watches. Chapter 8. The return of the second hand, the apprentice was found not dead, but hiding in a boarding house near the river. He had fled after discovering the pendulum chain weakened days earlier. He feared blame. He feared the master. He feared what greed might do when cornered. He swore. He never meant harm. He had planned to gather proof and leave quietly. On the night of the murder, he had argued, then stormed out before midnight. The clocks confirmed it. Several had been reset after he left. I found Timothy Harkness, where the city keeps its nearly lost, in a boarding house near the river, where the wallpaper had surrendered years ago, and the windows looked out on barges that moved with patient indifference. The landlady examined me as if I might be contagious. I am looking for a boy, I said. 17, thin, hands that smell faintly of oil. That could be half the city, she replied. This one is frightened of clocks, I said. Her expression changed a fraction. Room 12. Timothy opened the door before I knocked twice. He had the look of someone who had not been sleeping well and had been listening for footsteps in every creak of the floor. You are Mr. Goodwin, he said at once. That saves time, I replied. May I come in? He hesitated, then stepped aside. The room was narrow, bed chair, washstand, no clock. Good choice, I said, glancing around. He managed a weak smile. I did not want to hear ticking. Your master is dead, I said evenly. He closed his eyes. His shoulders sagged, not in surprise, but in confirmation of a fear. I did not kill him, he said quickly. I did not say you did, I replied. But you disappeared. He ran a hand through his hair. I had to, because. He looked at me directly. His eyes were steadier than I expected. Because I found the chain, he said. That was efficient. You found it when? I asked. 3 days before he died, Timothy said. I was cleaning the tall clock, the one in the workshop. I noticed the chain felt wrong when I touched it. Lighter, slightly rough in one place. He swallowed. I confronted him that night. And he said, he told me I was young and did not understand commerce. The phrase again, it was becoming a refrain. What did you accuse him of? I asked. Of planning something, Timothy said. Of setting it to fall. For whom? I said. He hesitated. I did not know. But you suspected. Yes. Did you suspect Calvin Bream? I asked. Timothy's jaw tightened. Mr. Bream came often. They argued about money. Money hidden in clocks, I said. His eyes widened slightly. You know? Yes, I said. Go on. He nodded slowly. I found an envelope once in the base of a clock. I did not open it. I asked Mr. Clark about it. He told me to mind my work. And you did not, I said. No, Timothy replied quietly. I began checking the books. Repairs recorded twice, small changes in amounts, customers complaining their clocks were wrong. Deliberately wrong, I said. Yes, he said. He adjusted them slightly, enough to cause inconvenience, enough to bring them back. And Mr. Bream? I asked. He would visit certain customers shortly after, Timothy said, offer assistance loans. And when payments were late, I asked, he collected. That fit too neatly to ignore. You said you found the filed chain, I reminded him. Yes, I removed that link, he said. My pulse ticked once harder. You removed it. I was afraid, he said. If it broke and someone was hurt, I did not want to be blamed for not speaking. I kept the link. He reached under the mattress and produced a small wrapped cloth. Inside lay a metal link, one side faintly scored with file marks. Evidence solid and deliberate. Why did you not go to the police? I asked. Because if Mr. Clark was planning something, and I accused him, he would deny it. And if Mr. Bream was involved, I did not want him knowing I had proof. So you plan to leave, I said. Yes, he said. I thought I would gather enough evidence, and then go quietly, find work elsewhere. But you stayed, I said. For one more night, he admitted. I wanted to copy some entries from the ledger. And that was the night he died, he nodded slowly. Tell me exactly what happened, I said. We argued again, Timothy said. He accused me of snooping. I told him I knew about the chain. I told him if he harmed anyone, I would go to the police. What did he do? He laughed, Timothy said. He said I misunderstood everything. He said the chain was a precaution. A precaution, I repeated. He would not explain. We argued until nearly midnight. I stormed out. I took my coat and left. You did not return. Number, what time was it? I asked. About 11:45, he said. I checked the wall clock downstairs before I left. Was it accurate? I asked. He gave a faint, humorless smile. I had stopped trusting them. Did you reset any clocks that night? I asked. No, he said firmly. That was important. When you left, was anyone else there? I heard someone at the door earlier in the evening, he said. A heavy knock. I stayed upstairs. Mr. Clark went down. Did you see who it was? Number. Could it have been Bream? Yes. When you left, did you see anyone on the street? Number. It was quiet. I studied him. His fear was real, but so was his relief at speaking. Several clocks in the shop were reset after midnight, I said. We confirmed it. His head jerked up. Reset? Yes, I said, adjusted forward. He stared at me. I did not do that. I know, I said. That left one person with access after Timothy left. Why did you not come forward when you heard about the death? I asked. He swallowed. Because I thought they would blame me, I had argued. I had taken the link. I had vanished. All true, I said, but incomplete. He looked at the small metal link in his hand. I never meant harm, he said quietly. I wanted to stop it. I believe you, I said. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe examined the link with visible satisfaction. "Filed," he said, cleanly, with foresight. "Timothy removed it before the pendulum fell?" I said. "Yes," Wolfe replied, "which means the fatal fall required reassembly." I blinked. "Reassembly, indeed," Wolfe said. "If the weakened link was removed, someone replaced it or filed another." I stared at him. "You think there were two filings?" "Possibly," Wolfe said. "Or the boy removed a section insufficient to prevent collapse." "That seems unlikely," I said. "Yes," Wolfe agreed. "Unlikely." He leaned back. "The clocks were reset after the boy left," he continued. "Why?" "To create a false timeline," I said. "Yes," Wolfe said softly. "To suggest the boy was present later than he was. Which means the murderer wanted suspicion to fall on Timothy," I said. "Precisely." The second hand had returned, Ali frightened, honest. And the clocks themselves were now witnesses to manipulation after midnight. Someone had adjusted more than gears that night. Someone had tried to move suspicion as easily as hands on a dial. Chapter 9. The widow's silence. The master's widow wore black like a curtain drawn too soon. She claimed ignorance of accounts and apprentices alike. But Wolfe asked about the polishing compound used on the pendulum chain. Her gloves bore its faint metallic scent. She alone had access to the locked cabinet of specialty tools. She had known about the hidden envelopes and about a failing investment that drained them. When her husband refused to stop skimming, she decided to stop him instead. The filed chain had been measured to fall when wound at a certain hour. Murder, time to appear mechanical. Wolfe prefers his revelations seated, his suspects assembled, and his logic undisturbed by weather. By 7 that evening, the office on West 35th Street held Inspector Kramer, Sergeant Stebbins, Calvin Bream with his confidence trimmed, Jonas Vale with his resentment polished, Miss Eleanor Riddle composed and pale, Timothy Harkness pale and composed, and finally Mrs. Edwin Clark, draped in black that absorbed light without returning it. She was a small woman, precise in movement, with gloved hands folded neatly in her lap. Her face was calm in the way of someone who has practiced calm in a mirror. Wolfe regarded them all as if arranging pieces on a board. "Gentlemen and ladies," he began, "we are concerned with time, not its passage, but its manipulation." Kramer made a sound of impatience. "Get on with it, Wolfe." "I intend to," Wolfe said placidly. Mr. Clark engaged in systematic fraud. He inflated service fees, double-billed repairs, and concealed unrecorded cash within the bases of grandfather clocks awaiting delivery. Bream shifted in his chair. Vale stared at the rug. Mrs. Clark did not move. "The apprentice, Timothy Harkness," Wolfe continued, "discovered discrepancies. He also discovered that the pendulum chain of the workshop's tall clock had been deliberately filed." Timothy swallowed, but held steady. "Mr. Harkness removed the weakened link," Wolfe said, lifting it from his desk blotter. "This act, though motivated by fear, likely prevented an earlier catastrophe." Kramer frowned. "Earlier?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "The chain as filed would not necessarily fail at once. It would fail when wound to a particular tension and allowed to swing for a predictable interval." He turned his gaze to Mrs. Clark. "Such precision requires knowledge," he said. "Knowledge of the clock's mechanics and of one's husband's habits." Mrs. Clark's voice was quiet. "My husband was a clockmaker. He wound his clocks daily." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "At approximately 9 each morning." Kramer's eyes narrowed. "You are saying the fall was scheduled?" "Precisely," Wolfe replied. "The chain was filed to withstand limited motion, but to break under full winding tension. The murderer knew when Mr. Clark would wind the clock and stand beneath it." Bream leaned forward. "You said the boy removed the filed link." "Yes," Wolfe said, "which created a complication." All eyes shifted to him. "The murderer discovered the removal," Wolfe continued, "and filed another link. The chain that failed was not the original weakened segment." Kramer stiffened. "We found only one filed break." "Because the first was removed," Wolfe said, tapping the link on his desk. "The second was filed later, more hastily but with sufficient care. He turned to Mrs. Clark. "You had access to the specialty tool cabinet, did you not?" She inclined her head slightly. "I kept the keys." "Containing precision files and polishing compounds," Wolfe said. She said nothing. Wolfe continued smoothly. Inspector Kramer's technician noted fresh polish on the broken chain. The filing marks were bright, recently treated. The compound used was a fine metallic polish available in that locked cabinet. Kramer glanced at Stebbins. Stebbins nodded once. The cabinet had indeed been secured. Wolfe's gaze rested on Mrs. Clark's folded hands. "You wore gloves when you came here this evening," he said, sensibly. "Yet when you removed one briefly to accept tea, I detected the faint scent of that same metallic compound." Her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly. "That is thin," Bream said abruptly. "Not alone," Wolfe replied. "But combined with motive, it acquires weight." He turned slightly in his chair. "Mrs. Clark was aware of her husband's skimming," Wolfe said. "She also knew of the hidden envelopes. She had assisted in bookkeeping before withdrawing from it." Mrs. Clark's eyes flicked up for the first time. "And," Wolfe continued, "she invested a substantial portion of that concealed cash in a speculative venture, an investment that failed." Kramer's head snapped toward her. "Is that true?" Silence. Wolfe answered for her. "Yes. Records of a brokerage account in her name show recent losses. Funds deposited in irregular sums corresponding to dates on the envelopes. Withdrawn rapidly, lost." Miss Riddle drew in a breath. Bream's expression shifted from suspicion to calculation. "When Mr. Clark refused to cease skimming," Wolfe said, "and perhaps threatened to expose the losses, Mrs. Clark faced ruin, financial and reputational." Mrs. Clark's voice came at last, thin but steady. "You have no proof." "I have sequence," Wolfe said. He lifted one heavy finger. "First, the original filing discovered by the boy. Second, its removal. Third, a renewed filing shortly before the fatal morning. Fourth, clocks in the shop reset after Mr. Harkness departed, to suggest his continued presence. Only someone remaining after midnight could do that." Timothy stared at the floor. Vale looked astonished. Bream watched Mrs. Clark closely now. "Fifth," Wolfe continued, "knowledge of Mr. Clark's winding routine. 6. Access to the locked cabinet. 7th, the scent of metallic polish on gloves worn hours after the alleged accident." Kramer stepped forward. "Why reset the clocks?" "To implicate the boy," Wolfe said. He had argued publicly. He had vanished. It was convenient. Mrs. Clark's composure cracked, just slightly. "He would not stop," she said suddenly. "He would not stop." The room held still. "He said it was harmless," she continued, her voice rising. "Small amounts, no one would notice. But the losses mounted, the investments failed. He blamed me." Her gloved hands clenched. "He said he would end the partnership with Mr. Bream," she said, glancing toward Bream, who went rigid. "He said he would keep the money himself and leave me to answer questions." Bream exploded. "That is a lie." "Sit down," Kramer barked. Wolfe did not raise his voice. "You filed the chain," he said quietly, "measured the depth, calculated the stress, timed it to the morning winding. You reset the clocks after the boy left to construct a narrative." Mrs. Clark's shoulders sagged. "I did not think it would look like murder," she whispered. "It would look like wear, like age." "Time betrayed you," Wolfe said. Kramer moved to her side. "Mrs. Clark, you are under arrest for the murder of Edwin Clark." She did not resist. She simply removed her gloves and placed them on Wolfe's desk. The faint metallic scent rose again. The second hand had returned. The chain had spoken. The clocks, once instruments of deception, had testified. And murder, timed to appear mechanical, had been measured too precisely to escape reason. Chapter 10. When time testifies, Kramer made the arrest beneath the silent pendulum. The clocks had been reset to mask argument and absence. But gears remember pressure, and metal remembers filing. The apprentice was cleared, though not unchanged. The rival closed his shop within the month. Riddle Street adjusted its watches. Back in the brownstone, Wolfe returned to his orchids. "Archie," he said, "time itself is innocent. It is people who falsify the minutes." And the clocks, relieved of their burden, ticked honestly again. Inspector Kramer has an instinct for theatre which he denies with vigor. He insisted the formal arrest of Mrs. Edwin Clark be conducted in the workshop on Riddle Street, directly beneath the restored grandfather clock, whose pendulum had delivered death with mechanical indifference. The shop had been reopened for the purpose. Police stood at the door. A small crowd had gathered outside, because New York does not miss a spectacle when it is within walking distance. The pendulum hung still. Mrs. Clark stood composed, dressed in black as before, though without gloves now. Her hands were bare and pale. If they trembled, it was not visible. Inspector Kramer read the charge in a voice designed for stone walls. She listened without interruption. "You are charged with the murder of Edwin Clark," he concluded. Her gaze lifted once to the clock case, then lowered again. "It was precise," she said quietly. He would have admired that. Kramer did not respond. He signaled to a patrolman. The cuffs were applied without struggle. Calvin Bream watched from the edge of the room. His expression, a complicated blend of anger and calculation. Jonas Vale stood farther back, stiff and silent. Timothy Harkness remained near the stair, eyes fixed not on Mrs. Clark, but on the pendulum, as if measuring whether it would move. It did not. The chain had been replaced with a new one, unmarred by file or deception. Inspector Kramer had insisted upon examining the original break again in the presence of a laboratory man. The filing marks were unmistakable. The Polish compound found in the locked tool cabinet matched the residue on the broken link. The cabinet key had been in Mrs. Clark's possession. More telling still had been the clock adjustments. Wolfe had demonstrated that several clocks in the shop had been reset forward by approximately 20 minutes after Timothy Harkness left on the night of the argument. Dust patterns on the bases and slight disturbances in accumulated grime revealed the recent handling. The minute hands bore faint new pressure marks. The purpose had been simple. If the clocks showed a later hour, then the argument could be placed closer to midnight. Timothy's departure would appear later. Suspicion would narrow around him like a tightening spring. But time, like Wolfe, resents tampering. The discrepancy between the shop clocks and the municipal time signal, recorded by a nearby bank's exterior clock that had not been touched, exposed the falsification. The bank clock, large and impersonal, had preserved the true hour. Riddle Street had possessed its own unimpeachable witness. When Kramer led Mrs. Clark away, there was no outcry, only the muted murmur of a neighborhood recalibrating its opinion. Calvin Bream lingered. "This clears the boy," he said, as if it were a concession extracted under duress. "It clears him of murder," I replied. "Your other enterprises remain open to inspection." His jaw tightened. "You have no proof against me." "Not yet," I said pleasantly. He gave me a long look, then turned and left. I suspected his accounts would soon attract attention of a less conversational sort. Jonas Vale approached Timothy awkwardly. "If you need work," Vale muttered, "I may have a position." Timothy looked at him, surprised. "I would expect accuracy," Vale added stiffly. "I can provide that," Timothy said. It was as close to reconciliation as Riddle Street was likely to manage. Within a month, Vale's shop would close anyway, not from scandal but from arithmetic. Competition reshapes streets as surely as crime does. Riddle Street would endure, but not unchanged. Timothy accompanied me back to West 35th Street that evening at Wolfe's request. Wolfe prefers to conclude matters in his own domain, where the chairs are comfortable and the reasoning final. The office smelled faintly of orchids and dinner preparations. Fritz moved somewhere in the background with the serenity of a man who believes in proper sources and proper justice. Timothy sat in the red leather chair, looking smaller than before yet steadier. "You acted imprudently," Wolfe told him without preface. "Yes, sir," Timothy said. "But not dishonorably," Wolfe continued. "You removed the initial weakened link. That act likely delayed catastrophe." Timothy swallowed. "I did not know what else to do." "You might have come to me sooner," Wolfe said. "I did not know you." That is unfortunate, Wolfe said dryly. Inspector Kramer had come as well, though he stood near the door as if resisting furniture. The case is clean, Kramer said. Chain filed twice, first by Mrs. Clark to test the effect, second after the boy removed the initial link. She calculated the stress tolerance. She admitted as much. She is a capable mechanic, Wolfe said. Her error was psychological, not technical, Kramer snorted. She thought it would pass for accident. She underestimated scrutiny, Wolfe replied. Kramer's gaze shifted to the clocks on the side table. Those will be returned to their owners. Yes, Wolfe said. Without envelopes. Kramer hesitated. You were right about the timing. I am frequently right, Wolfe said calmly. Kramer shook his head and left before the temptation to argue overcame him. Timothy rose to follow me out, then paused. Mr. Wolfe, he said, the clocks, they will run honestly now. Wolfe regarded him. Clocks always run honestly. It is their handlers who lie. After Timothy departed, Wolfe remained seated, eyes half closed. Archie, he said, you perceive the irony. I see several. I replied. A woman who calculated mechanical failure, but miscalculated conscience. A collector who profited from anxiety, but did not anticipate scrutiny. A rival who resented dishonesty, but lacked the courage to confront it directly. Wolfe inclined his head, and a boy who learned that integrity carries risk. Will he keep it? I asked. That depends, Wolfe said, on whether he values time more than profit. Dinner was announced. Wolfe rose with deliberation and proceeded to the dining room, where Fritz's arrangements awaited. Justice, in Wolfe's world, does not interfere with appetite. Later, when the house was quiet and the city beyond our windows had settled into its own rhythms, I sat in the office and listened. The 3 clocks we had retained for examination ticked steadily. Their beats were aligned now, synchronized to a single accurate source. No hand crept ahead or lagged behind. Riddle Street would recover. It would sell, repair, argue, and speculate. The bakery would continue to close on Sundays. The locksmith would continue to distrust strangers, and somewhere, someone would attempt again to bend time to advantage. But for the moment, time itself was acquitted. Wolfe descended briefly from the plant rooms, his massive outline framed by the stair. Archie, he said, remember this, time is innocent. It is people who falsify the minutes. Yes, sir, I said. He nodded once and returned upstairs to his orchids, where growth obeyed its own measured pace and required no deception. In the quiet office, beneath the steady ticking of honest mechanisms, I reflected that murder had been attempted with precision and defeated by greater precision. Gears remember pressure, metal remembers filing, and when time is forced to testify, it does so without favor. The pendulum swung, not in judgment now, but in balance.